Welcome to Quit to Win, the show where we explore the moments people had to let go of destructive pattern, limiting identity, and battle in order to rebuild their life with purpose and clarity. Today guest is Christopher Swing, Executive Board Director, President, and COO of Vintage Surgical Solution, private equity investor, adjunct professor, and leader whose career has spanned logistics, healthcare, banking, manufacturing, and finance across multiple industries and decades. But Christopher's stories does not begin at the top. It begins with the door that closed without warning. He was in GM training programs at United Graphic, building towards a clear future. When the company sold, the path that has been promising simply disappeared. Those positions he has been working towards was no longer his. At that moment, being told no, now became the beginning of his career, built entirely on his own terms. It's really a pleasure and honor to have you on the show, Christopher.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That's a humbling introduction.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christopher. So, Christopher, you were in GM training program, building towards a specific future, and then the company sold, and you were told that the path was gone. Take us back to that moment, and what did it feel like to have a clear direction, remove without a warning?
Yes, I mean, at the time, obviously, it was a little disappointing because I had, gone through different training sections, and I was on my way to becoming the GM of that business. But looking backwards, it was truly a blessing because, at the time we were in manufacturing, but it was really around printing. And as you guys know, especially around book printing, nobody buys a book anymore. And
Yeah,
so I didn't have the hindsight back then. I knew, Kindle was a thing, and at the I don't know if I really knew of Amazon, but we knew that there was a likelihood that books would continue to become less prominent in our houses. But yeah, looking backwards is a true blessing. I got to move on to some exciting adventures. None of which I would change because it's how I got to where I am today, and I'm super happy to be here.
yeah, amazing, amazing. All the experience linked together really help you to what you are doing today. Amazing. So you have built a career across logistics, healthcare, private equity, manufacturing, banking, and finance. That breadth, it's unusual. Most executives go deep in one lane. Was that diversity intentional from the start, or did it emerge from necessary and opportunity after the first door closed?
Yeah, so I think, to be honest, it wasn't intentional. I think the difference is that as I needed to make transition within either a workplace, or I felt like I needed a different challenge, I didn't limit myself into that I had to continue down that same path. And I think that's what's a little bit different about me is I was able to convince others that the experiences that I had in finance and accounting would transcend all those industries. And of course it does, because math is math. Obviously the balance sheets, the P&Ls, cash flow statements, they all look different in different places. But in essence, they were ultimately the same. But I think that's true of other places too. So like, let's say you're in HR, or let's say you're like a supervisor or manager. Those same, experiences transcend. I think where it gets a little bit difficult if you're extremely technical. So let's say that like within the printing, your technical experiences around printing, that's a pretty difficult thing to
Yeah,
transcend. Or banking, or any of those businesses. I'm kind of like an expert in nothing, but I know a lot about a lot of different industries. And I think that's what's a little bit interesting. But when you really drill down to it, it's my extensive knowledge in finance and accounting, and just in building meaningful and having vision around what it is that you're trying to do within an organization, that's allowed me to transcend in a leadership perspective through lots of different industries.
yeah, amazing. Being that all those particular training here and there, they were transferable skill compared to being technical in just one role. So the United Graphic movement, being told you were no longer considered for the GM role, what did you decide in the aftermath of that? Not immediately, but in weeks that follow, and what direction did you choose and why?
So that's when I kind of went back to the roots, right? So I was in a GM training program. I was moving to be the CEO. It gave me the vision that, hey, I've got somebody believed in me, right? And so it gave me the confidence of that. But it also made me say, I'm in a sales capacity. That's not really what I love. I do enjoy it, but it's not my first love. And so what I decided was I needed to retrench into my core. And so I said, I need to find a job in accounting or in finance in another organization and see where it takes me. And so that's what I did. I went joined another manufacturing facility, about $120 million food manufacturing facility called Linder's Bagels. It's the a local plant that produces that product for all over the United States. And then from that, I was promoted into a GM, or to a operations finance role, where I was the controller of all the operations of the North American bird's eye vegetables plants. And so just had an insane amount of experiences in that business. We were spending about 400 million US dollars to operate the three or four plants that I was operating, and then we were investing somewhere between 60 and 95 million dollars a year in capital improvements in those facilities. I remember one plant we had 1,800 employees in, and there were 1,600 people in the town. And so, just gives you some perspective of the opportunity that I've had to experience in the past, which I think were all extremely valuable in preparing me for the work that I do here at Vantage every day.
Amazing having to deal with those numbers, higher numbers of employees every now and then, and in hearing that, yeah, it's really amazing. I just speak volumes. So more like sometimes you don't know when those particular experience are creating, and until when the need comes handy. So you describe your leadership as rooted in integrity, credibility, and the passion for progress. Those are not just value; they are response to something. Where did that foundation come from, and was there a moment earlier in your career where you saw what leadership without those things look like?
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I'm sure that's true, but it's not anything that sticks out in my mind. I think what I came up with when I was moving through my career is I needed to be different. And I think the difference is that a lot of times people operate as kind of whatever they need to do to fulfill the expectations of their supervisors. And I'm a believer in that too. But I think that you have to differentiate yourself in what you believe. And I think people will see that, and they'll either appreciate it or they won't. If they don't, that's fine, right? It's not like having integrity or being of a growth mindset is going to cause you to necessarily lose a job. I don't know anybody that says, "Oh, you have integrity or you have a
Yeah,
growth mindset, so you can't stay here."
yeah,
But I think what'll happen is those people that value that and they see that there's a workforce that's lacking in it, they'll align with it and they'll appreciate it and they'll recognize you for it. And it's kind of like, how when you notice something, like you know that there's somebody within your organization that you really appreciate, but you really can't put your finger on it, why that you appreciate them so much. Well, the difference is when you're vibrant, when you're transparent and you're clear about, why it is that you're here and what your expectations are. Those people that are like, man, I like him, but I don't know why I like him. They'll know why they like you, because they'll be because of one of those criterion or characteristics of yourself that you talk about. And so I just encourage people to know who they are and what they're trying to accomplish. And then I think the reason that I was always focused on the growth perspective is because two things really. One is that, there's no business that's ever stable. You're either growing or you're dying. And I think if people really step back and they think about that perspective, like let's just say that your revenue and net income are the same year after year. Well, think about the impact that inflation has on those dollars, right? They're not meaningful. They're not the same tomorrow as they are today. And so I think you either have to choose. You either have to be part of the group that's focused on growing, or you're part of the group that's dying. And so I
yeah.
didn't want to be in that group. And so that was kind of, my focus along the way was, and I think part of it was that transition from United Graphics into Pinnacle Foods, which was, hey, now that I'm looking backwards, I'm seeing that that was probably not the best place for me anyways. So I got a real blessing by having to move somewhere else. And United Graphics would have been glad to have me continue as a salesperson. They told me that because I was doing so well. But if that's not really what you're trying to accomplish, don't stay on the wrong path for too long. Because then when you get back, you'll be like, wow, I just spent 10 years of my life doing something I don't enjoy. And now that key skill that I was really unique because I had at such a young age it's not really that impressive anymore because a long time has passed. And so I think that it was a great blessing to me for them to sell and to not include me and for me to
Yeah.
move to that next step in my career, which gave me a great stepping stone, into to where I'm at today. Never in my wildest dreams did I believe that I would be part of the management group for a billion and a half US dollar company
Hmm.
trying to, make it work and to figure out how to pull levers to make it more valuable every day.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Especially the point you just make, Professor, just dawned on me that a business is either growing or more like dying, and also same applicable to humans too. We are either growing in terms of learning and becoming the best version of ourselves in terms of credibility, passion, and everything, and integrity, or we are dying without learning and doing shabby work. And yeah, this is really amazing, and thank you so much, for sharing. So you have been involved in private equity transaction that generate sustainable return and empower emerging company. What did you look for in a venture that most investors miss, and what has your operation background show you about the difference between promising investments and the truly transformational ones?
So I think my recommendation to anybody is to not invest in things they don't understand. And I think that's probably the key thing that differentiates a lot of the private equity investment is they're trying to invest in things that they think will be worth more money tomorrow or next year. And when you do that, that's fine, but you come from a very limited understanding of how those businesses actually operate every day. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they're basically taking a portfolio of investments and hoping that there's more winners than losers, right? And the difference is when you're operating a business within a portfolio, the key is to stand out. And so I think what's different about Vantage and what's different about us when we look at acquisitions to continue to grow is that first of all, we kind of know where we're going. We know what we want to accomplish. And so what we do is we look for acquisitions that accomplish those goals. And as we do that, we want to be in spaces that we understand. Now, we may not understand like all the nuances of a particular technology that they deliver, or we may not understand a particular, modality of their delivery. And what I mean by that is like for Vantage, we're a mobile services provider. So we take all of our equipment and products and people into hospitals and surgery centers in about half of the US. And where we may not completely understand is okay, maybe we have another healthcare company that's delivery model is similar, but half of their revenue is derived from accounts where all the equipment actually stays placed on site. Or maybe it's from a specialty that we currently don't operate. The difference though is you can bridge that knowledge, right, by interacting with people who you know and trust in that healthcare community. And then you can also bridge that gap by really diving deep into understanding, okay, so what is unique about their particular delivery model and how do they still have the ability to differentiate themselves over financing if they're fixing all this equipment? And I think that, you know, what you do is you make sure you know the majority of what's going on in your investment portfolio. And then you bridge that gap with additional knowledge for some of your shortcomings, such as like not completely understanding everything about the modality. And through that, you can make an appropriate estimation. The one thing that I'll tell you that is very unique about private equity in the US is that the hold time is very short. So most acquisitions are held between 5 and say 12 years. That's a really short period of time to make a huge difference, not only in the value of the business, but also in the income that the business produces. And you need to be a high delivery model business in order to be able to support a private equity investment. It needs to be in the 20+% year over year growth, which is it's not impossible. It's much more complicated than people think. I think in most privately held businesses or even businesses owned by large investment groups or family offices, upper single digits are, sufficient to show, insane amounts of, net income growth or top line growth. That doesn't come close to the hurdle in private equity. But I think what that causes us to do is it causes us to take an unrealistic amount of risk in order to return the capital at a level that's expected from the private equity investors in a reasonable period of time.
Amazing, amazing. A whole lot of things to look at in here. before you dive into a kind of making investment. And one of them is the fact that you just make reference of understanding the business you're going into. And even if you didn't know much of it all, being able to go all out for knowledge to be able to cover for the short side. Yeah, it's really amazing. And thank you so much for sharing. So you have taught as an adjunct professor at Eastern Illinois University alongside everything else you have built. What drives you to invest in the next generation of business leader? And what do you see in students that most of the corporate world is not yet equipped to develop?
So I think my vision behind it was when I got out of school, I knew so little about what I needed to do
Yeah,
that I needed to give them some practical aspects of what they were leaving. You know, school is great in the sense that it provides lots of theoretical knowledge to people, but the reality is that when there's no textbook and you're actually dealing with real situations, what do you do? And it really came from a place of insecurity in myself, and it was like I got out of school and I got a really good job and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, and I thought, how do we give the students the alternative perspective, which is you do know what you're doing. And here's the practical aspects of what it is that everybody's teaching. And I think that was really my vision behind it. And then in addition to that, I just do tons of mentoring. And I really believe that the reason that most people don't have mentors is because they don't ask. Because I don't know if too many people that can't find 30 minutes in a week to go have a coffee or to sit down for a glass of water and walk through, you know, their perspective of not only what the person's strengths are, but ways that they can grow their strengths to be more valuable to the organization that they work for. So I think about that from an internal perspective, but I also think you should think about external mentors, and that is people that are outside of your organization. Because here's the thing, if all of a sudden you need to change careers or you need to change companies or you need to change whatever, you know, it's good to have people that aren't just the ones inside of your company that have experience or have helped you to grow, because those other people will likely continue to invest in you, but that CEO or the C-suite member that was investing in you to that point may not continue to invest in you because you're leaving the company, right?
yeah,
And so I just think it's important for us to not only to ask to have a formal mentorship relationship with people, but also to seek out the right people, the people that emulate the who they are.
yeah,
You know, you want to, if you want to emulate who someone is, that's a great indication that you should be asking them to mentor you. If they have a role that's something you would like to do, ask them to mentor you. If they have found success in whatever it is that's important to you, ask them to mentor you. I mean, these are all great ways to get perspective from someone who's already done it,
yeah.
which is almost like a cheat code, right? Like you can go in from behind the scenes and say, I know you had to do it the hard way. Is there a way to cheat this process and make it faster and easier for me to be more successful than you were? And I think people love to invest in others. I think in general, that's true of many folks, especially those who are very successful in what they do. I think they would love to
Yeah, to
participate
give
and
back.
to help support someone else.
Yeah, amazing. I think this is really lovely, especially when you just make reference of going to school. That the first time when you actually more like take up a first job, you don't even know what is expected of you and everything that's been demanded. And yeah, you have been able to kind of break that particular gap by reaching out, and that's where mentorship come into being, helping greatly out to do things differently. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So lastly, you have built a culture of continuous improvement across multiple organizations. For a leader who wants to embed that into their team, but does not know where to start, what is the first structural change that make it real rather than just aspirational?
So, continuous improvement is a necessary evil, in my opinion, in all of our organizations. And the thing that I am currently using is a process called EOS, which is Entrepreneurship Operating System. And the reason that that's important is it really helps you to define what everyone's role is, but it also helps you define the vision of where you're going. And then what it does is it challenges every employee every quarter to make 1 to 3 what we call rocks, which are goals to make a difference in the company. And here's why that matters. You know, we used to say if you could just make 1% improvement every day, right? Like you'd have significant improvement over a year. Well, the reality is that 1% improvement every day is like a 400% improvement per year. And I don't know that that's very realistic, right? So regardless of the math, what EOS does is it really says, okay, let's say you have 50 or 100 people in your organization, and let's say that they all make an attempt to improve one or two things within the organization every quarter. Let's just say it's two. And let's say we have 100 people. That's 200 improvements that's made in our organization every quarter. And let's say that we're only 80% successful. That's still 160 things that needed fixed that are getting fixed in our organization every quarter. And as they get some confidence, they're going to pick bigger and bigger expectations for themselves to improve things. And so I really appreciate that modality or that system of improvement. I think it's really valuable. And why they pick 90 days is because what they found is if you pick a goal that's bigger than that, a lot of times you lose interest before you get to the
Yeah,
result. But in 90 days, you can keep people focused because it's literally like 3 months. And
yeah,
so, we set the goal before we enter into the quarter. So we're in the process of helping our employees set their goals for Q3 because obviously July 1st will be the start of that. And then it's really just following up with them and saying, from a leadership team, how are my team doing as far as hitting their rocks? Are they accomplishing those goals or not? And then are there things that I can do to contribute to help them to accomplish their goals? Because I mean, if it's only the leadership that are making these changes, it's very limited in how many changes we can
yeah,
make per year. Let's say that so in my organization, there's 5 of us in the leadership team, I think. And, so if we did it, we would make, 10 to let's say 15 or 20 changes per quarter. But I just told you we have 100 employees. And so and this is theoretical, but in 100 employees, you're talking 160 changes. And so it's significantly greater impact. And that also gives confidence to the employees that, hey, I'm important here. I create value here. The organization appreciates what I do bring to the table, and we can celebrate those successes. We can also look into understanding, on those, say 20 or 40 issues that we had that we didn't actually hit the rocks. Are there some change that we can make to those expectations to make it clearer? And then could we accomplish them in the next 90 days? And so I think that it's just a way of building this idea that we need to continue to grow and evolve as an organization. And it really gets back to the idea that we started this conversation with, which is you're either growing or you're dying.
yeah,
And when that's true of your revenue, that's true of your net income too, and your cash flows. And so, I think the key to it is that if you understand that real world scenario that tomorrow, even if I produce the same, it's worth less. I need to grow in order to produce the same. Then you look at, infrastructures like EOS, that will help you to deliver those results a quarter in and quarter out.
yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Christopher. This is really robust to actually more like, yeah, ensuring continuous more like improvement across team. And yeah, it's really amazing now. So, Christopher, from audience would love to reach out to connect with you and to explore everything you're building. Or how can they reach out and where's the best
Yeah,
platform?
the easiest way to find me is at www.swing.com. And that has all
Yeah,
my contact information there, as well as kind of a brief synopsis of all the things that I'm currently working on.
yeah, thank you so much, Christopher. Thank you for bringing out the breadth of experience, the steadiness of character, and the genuine commitment of developing all that stuck with you. Yeah, your reminder that the path taken away is often the one that would have kept you from the life you were actually meant to build, or one this audience actually need to hear. Yeah, this has really been amazing. A deal that fell through, a role that disappeared, a direction that closed, and need to be reminded that the stories is not over yet. Remember, integrity, credibility, and a passion for progress are not just value, they are competitive advantage that compound over lifetime. Once again, the pleasure and honor having you on the show, Christopher.
Thank you so much.